Hey everyone, welcome back to Wonderland Wednesday. Today we're going to be finishing up our review of the 1998 version of Alice Through the Looking Glass. If you missed part 1, I'll have a link in the description below. Thanks for watching.
She comes across the White King, which was a fun scene. I really liked him as the White King.
Well, we like the actor, so...
The role is supposed to be, dare I say, cute. And he did a great job portraying the character and without being his understated way was just great with this character, delivering these quirky lines. There's this part where he's eating the hay, trying to refresh himself, and he says that there's nothing like eating hay when you're, I don't know if it was winded. I didn't completely understand, and neither did you, what they were doing with the Anglo-Saxon messenger, because it was sort of this ghost-like...
At first it looked like just a silhouette of the March Hare, but then when they were leaving, it looked like there was something on the ground, and maybe it was supposed to be that the shadow and the person had switched places. And
the hare had this really squeaky voice, like chipmunk voice. We just didn't understand what was going on there. Feel free to enlighten us.
This was another place also where they deviated because it was only the hare. The Mad Hatter wasn't there, and then they didn't go into the lion and the unicorn scene at all.
They mentioned them.
Yeah.
But they left that one out, which was, it's okay.
Eventually, she ends up finding the knights, the Red Knight and the White Knight, preparing for a joust.
The guy who plays the Red Knight, I recognize him from a far more dignified role as Willoughby in the 90s version of Sense and Sensibility, which is what I grew up watching. That is like the version of my upbringing. I have seen the newer one, which can't be new anymore. But as far as Willoughby's, he is the Willoughby. It's kind of like Mr. Darcy, that the guy from the 90s, oh man, what's his name? Colin Firth. He is the Mr. Darcy, and Greg Wise is the Willoughby. But this was a very silly role where he says he's capturing Alice and the White Knight comes out and they duel, and then you go into the whole scene where Alice is following along with the White Knight through the woods. And the White Knight is played by Ian Holm, another huge British actor. Bilbo. Yes, Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. If he seems familiar, that's probably why, if you're an American. Yeah. He's been in lots of other things too, but I'm sure the big one we know him from is Bilbo. And I was rather struck watching this, just how great his accent is. It reminded you of Peter Sallis. Yeah, he sounded a lot like Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. And the characters are kind of similar too, both strange inventors. The scene with the White Knight, I applaud them, because I have seen it where that felt like it went on forever. And I was afraid that was what was going to happen with this one. But for the most part, no. Yeah, he's such a good actor that it didn't feel strenuous at all. He was rather charming. The White Knight is supposed to be this gentle, benign character, and he did a great job. The scene with the poem of the old man on the fence. If anything went on too long, it was the poem, but that didn't feel like, I don't think I felt like that went on too long. It was kind of strange, though. With this one, instead of a 1950s rock vibe, it had a 20s or 30s vibe. The old man looked like he was wearing lipstick. They weren't making him look like a girl or anything. But what it seemed to me was that they were trying to go for sort of a silent movie vibe at the beginning,
They did have some talking later on.
Yeah, maybe kind of like an old radio type of talking. And stylistically, it was just odd, but it wasn't horrible.
Yeah.
And
it worked better than the 1950s Walrus and Carpenter scene. It was it still felt kind of out of place, but it worked better than that one.
Yeah. She watches him go off by himself, waving her little hanky.
The next scene is the one that they added it back in, because originally Lewis Carroll had written this scene, and I think it was his publisher didn't really care for it, and he thought that if he wanted to cut the book down a little bit, he should get rid of this scene. So they only had mention of this scene called The Wasp in the Wig in like a letter of correspondence, but I think in the 70s somebody found the letter, or somebody found the original document. So now it's kind of being included in different versions as sort of a supplementary material.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it was a good scene.
It started out with a prop of an insect, and then it was an elderly man playing the part of the insect. It had some clever dialogue and a really crazy wig that didn't look like it fit into it, but you find out that's really part of this poem.
Mm-hmm. I liked the Wasp. I liked the guy who played him. I thought it was a cute scene. It was not like a necessary addition, but if they're going to add in a scene that's not in the book, I'm glad they chose one that the author actually wrote.
Oh, definitely. I think it's interesting that not only do they include so much dialogue from the book, but they even added extra in from the author. So I applaud them for that. And it was an interesting scene, and it had some cute, clever dialogue in it. A little bit about stealing sugar. No brown? Anyway.
After the Wasp, there was a little strange transition here where it looked like she went through a bounce house.
Yeah, what was up with the bounce house?
I don't know. It was just like 3 seconds.
Or should we say bouncy house? It
was probably more like a bouncy castle, which is how the Brits refer to them. So maybe that had something to do with it.
Somebody was getting creative once again. Then they were on swings, which I do not recall from the book at all.
They were kind of going to different locations, like scenic locations. I thought it was really cool where they ended up.
Weren't they swinging in what looked like a very aged relic of a church?
Yeah.
It was interesting, like whimsical.
See,
not in a disrespectful way. This was like an empty building that was
just
open.
Like some walls left from an ancient civilization. I don't know.
Maybe Middle Ages.
Yeah, really old. Next we have the party, and before we get to the party, there was an interesting transition. And not even interesting, just weird.
This bothered me.
This was the most out of place thing, I think.
You had different scenes in this movie where I don't even know how to describe it. Almost like a weird dreamlike creature coming through the woods, like when you're thinking about the Jabberwocky.
Yeah.
And in this scene, there are all of these fast-paced shots.
Yeah.
Dark shots.
Like they took the camera through a tunnel, a dimly lit tunnel, and then sped up the footage really quickly so it looks like you're zooming through the shot.
But it was creepy. I found it disturbing. Not Hitchcock disturbing necessarily, but I didn't like it. It was actually creepy.
Very out of place.
And then she's trying to get in, she's ringing the bells, and you have this frog that sounds like a creature out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Or
really
somebody
weird.
Calling you up for ransom.
Yeah. Then she's at the party, which is also very strange. I mean, the party's weird in the book, but this is, I don't know.
This is not the worst party that I've seen.
That's true.
For this scene. The lighting was different, but it wasn't bad. They had her being introduced to food and not really getting a chance to eat.
And then she's supposed to get up and give a speech, I think, and she ends up floating in the air. And at some point, she's fed up, but you don't have her shaking the Red Queen and waking up to the kitten. You do have her pulling the tablecloth.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that's where she ends up on the floor, like she'd fallen off the bed and was entangled in the covers or something.
So she wakes up, she's rather apologetic to her daughter. She gives her a toy walrus, and she ends up going off to bed.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the daughter under the covers reading the end poem. I think that was a clever way to end that. With the direction that they took the film that was so different in the real life portion. All said and done, I told you that I liked about 85% of the film, which is something for these films.
Yeah, and I said that sounds like a pretty good percentage. I think I agree. There was some stuff that could have been done way better, but other things they did really, really well. And all in all, this is probably one of my top favorite adaptations so far.
This is probably the best, specifically through the looking glass, that we have seen so far.
Yes. Well, I think that's all for today's Wonderland Wednesday. Again, like I said the last time we filmed together, I'm not sure what we're going to do next week. Right now I'm just kind of building up a stockpile for when I'm back in Ames, so we'll see what I have time to film next week. It'll probably be just me, but Sarah will be back eventually. So we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.